Have you ever wondered, like, are there rules regarding creating riches? Are there, like, specific principles that you have to apply if you desire to get wealthy? Well, I did some thinking, and I figured out there are 12 rules for wealth. And on this video, I'm going to break down what those 12 rules are. There are 4 pillars, and under each of those pillars, there are 3 principles that we have to apply if we are going to create wealth. And at the end, I'm going to wrap it all up in a bow for you and show you how it correlates exactly with something else I've already taught you. So grab your pen and paper. There's going to be a lot of writer-downers. Okay, the first thing, before I even get into the 12 rules for wealth, is you have to understand that if you're going to create wealth, you have to understand or have an awareness of what wealth is and how it works. And you have to understand about the nature or the essence of wealth. And the nature or the essence of wealth is this: wealth is a spiritual result. So in order for you to create wealth, you have to operate at a higher spiritual level. The essence of wealth is not mostly materialistic. The essence of wealth is not materialistic at all. And when you operate from that perspective, you stop believing the lie that money is wealth. Money is not wealth. Money is just one of the arena in which wealth manifests itself. Obviously, it's an important arena, especially if you live in a society where they are not giving away electricity and water and clothes and food, and you have to buy those things, so it would be good for you to be able to create some wealth. So, pillar number 1 is you must create a mental wealth inventory. A lot of people are talking about mental health, but I don't hear anybody talking about mental wealth. You say, what do you mean talking about mental wealth? Well, when I say mental wealth, I mean, and I've said this before, in order for you to create lack in your experience, you must first create lack in your expectation. Well, if that's true, in order for you to create wealth in your experience, you must first create wealth in your expectation. So you have to have a mental wealth inventory. And so in your mental wealth inventory, it's about raising your level of awareness to what actually creates wealth and why some people have it and some people don't. So first and foremost, principle number 1, your wealth level will be determined by the level of spirituality that you are working on when you're working. What do I mean? The level of wealth that you create will be determined by the level of spirituality that you're working on when you're working. Well, a lot of people believe that you're going to create wealth if you are working harder. But I submit to you that's only partially true. You can only create wealth by working harder if you're working harder on something that actually works. If you're working harder on something that doesn't work, working harder on what doesn't work doesn't make you successful, it doesn't make you money, it doesn't create wealth for you. So you have to work on what's working. And so instead of working to create, quote, more value, because wealth is the result of creating value, what you have to do is you have to learn how to work at a higher spiritual level. So I've taught this before, and I'll share it with you again, and that is, there are 4 levels of value, and wealth is an exchange of value. That's what wealth is. Like, my ability to create wealth is going to be in direct proportion to my ability to create value for someone other than myself, right? So, since that's the case, there are 4 levels of value. If I operate at the lowest levels of value, I'm going to make a very little bit of money. If I operate at the highest levels of value, I'm going to create a lot of money or a lot of wealth. So the lowest level of value is implementation. And on the implementation level, the resource that we use to create wealth we use our muscles over time. What does that mean? That means we are doing something physically. We're cleaning something, we're fixing something, we're moving something, we're lifting something, we're driving something. So we're using our muscles, we're using our physicality over a period of time that we are exchanging for somebody else's money. And we're going to make somewhere between minimum wage and maybe 40,000, 80,000. We'll call it 80,000 a year, right? Between minimum wage, 80,000 a year. Minimum wage if we're making tacos at Taco Bell, 80,000 a year if you're working on high-end luxury cars. Okay, then if you want to make more money, you have to operate at a higher spiritual level. Well, the next level is unification. By the way, working at a higher level of value doesn't necessarily mean you're working harder. In fact, oftentimes, the work that you do at a higher level is not as hard as the work that you do at a lower level. It just is more, it's a higher spiritual activity, so therefore it produces a higher compensation. Well, unification, on this level, the resource that we use to make money are our management skills. And when we use our management skills, we're going to make somewhere between $40,000 a year and $250,000 a year. And we'll make $40,000 a year if we're managing Taco Bell. We'll make $250,000 a year if we're a middle manager at Lockheed Martin or Boeing or John Deere or one of those big Fortune 100 companies. Cool. So when we get up a little bit higher and we begin to work at this level, this is above this line is where wealth begins to be created. And so this level is communication. And on the communication level, the resource you use to create wealth is your mouth. So use your mouth to create wealth. And on this level, on the low end, you could be making $100,000 a year selling cars. On the high end, you could be making $100 million. And so when we understand the levels of value, in order for me to make more money, I have to work at a higher level of spiritual activity. Managing people who do the work is a higher level of spiritual activity than doing the work yourself. Communicating a message that creates a message that moves the masses, or having conversations that create cash flow, is a higher spiritual activity than just managing the people doing the thing. You think about it. Language is something that only spiritual beings have. So if you want to create a higher level of wealth, you must become a better communicator. There are several ways you can become a better communicator. One is read more books. Two is to actually write more. If you will read more and you will write more, it'll help you become, like when you write something down and you think you're clear, if you want to find out if you're as clear as you think you are, take the thing you think you're clear about and write it down and then go read it and read it to someone. And if they get it, then you're clear. If they don't get it, then you're not nearly as clear as you thought you were. Okay, and then the highest level of value is imagination. And on this level, you use two resources. You use your mind and you use your money to create wealth. And on this level, you could be making anywhere on the low end from $1 million a year to, on the high end, it could be billions. Okay, so when we understand that thinking is a higher spiritual activity than talking is higher than managing people, and managing people is higher than doing it yourself. So when you operate at a higher spiritual level, operating at a higher spiritual level produces more wealth because that's the way God set it up from the beginning. Okay, I'm not going to change that. You're not going to change that. So understand that because wealth is spiritual, your level of wealth will be determined by the spiritual level that you are working on when you create the wealth. So if you're working, look at your time that you spend working. If the time you spend working, if most of that time you're spent working, you spend actually manipulating something physically, the amount of money you're going to be able to make doing that is going to be limited. Why? Because muscles are a physical resource. Time is a limited resource. When I take a physical resource and I multiply it times a limited resource, I have to get a limited output. Like the output can't be unlimited. So, but if you think about it, if I'm managing people, I'm actually getting more work done than if I did the thing myself. This is why when you build a business, when you hire people, hiring people helps you get more productivity done. Why? Because managing people is a higher spiritual activity than doing the thing yourself. And there are ways in which managing people is harder than doing the thing yourself, but it's also worth it. Okay, so you're tracking. So that's principle number one. Under the first pillar, create a mental wealth inventory. So the first principle in the mental wealth inventory is this: your wealth level will be determined by the level of spirituality that you're working on when you create it. B, the next point or the next principle is this: your wealth is determined by your ability to create value for someone other than yourself. So you have to go out into the marketplace. You have to find a big pool of people with a really big problem, or at least a problem that they're willing to pay to solve. The bigger the pool of people and the bigger the problem, and the deeper the pockets are of the people who have that problem, the more likely I am to get wealthy in that arena. So many people, they don't evaluate the pool of people. Is the pool of people big enough? They don't ask that question. Like, you start a business, you don't even ask, are there like 100 people in the world that want this? Or there are 100,000? Or there are 100 million? Or are there billions of people who would desire to have this outcome if they knew it existed? Because if the pool of people is too small, it doesn't matter how good your solution is. See, some people go out and they'll write a book and they'll think, this is a great book. What may be a great book, but if nobody wants to read it, it doesn't matter. They'll go invent something. They say, this is the greatest product ever invented. It might be, but if nobody wants the result the product can produce, it doesn't matter. And so is there a big pool of people? You have to ask that question. You're getting ready to go to bed. Is there a big pool of people that have this problem? Okay? Is the problem a big problem, or is it a mosquito bite, or is it like a snake bite? Like, how severe is the result of not solving this problem? How devastating are the consequences of not solving this problem? Because the bigger the pool of people is, and the bigger the problem is, then like I have just increased greatly my opportunity to create wealth. And see, a lot of you, what you've done is you've gone to school for a thing, and you studied that thing, and you got all this time, effort, energy, and money invested in learning how to do this thing. So to you, you value the thing you put money into, time into, effort into, energy into. And so what you've done is you go out into the marketplace, you want to talk to people about that. But I've got news for you. They don't care. They care about their stuff, their problems. You're talking, and you want to interrupt what they're already thinking about, what they're already concerned about, and then you want to get them concerned about something else because that's what you know how to do. I promise you, that is called the formula for disaster. So, wealth, your ability to create wealth. This is principle number 2 under your wealth, your spiritual wealth. Inventory. So understand, or your mental wealth inventory. This is number 1 under your mental wealth inventory. Number 2 rather, you have to have the ability to create a value for someone other than yourself. And so that means we have to stop making ourselves the priority, and we have to make other people the priority, and stop worrying about our problems. I need to make this money, 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 and then go out and solve somebody else's problem. And then they'll be, I'm happy to pay this money, I'm happy to pay this money, I'm happy to pay this money. And so your wealth is going to be in direct proportion to your ability to create wealth, to create value for someone other than yourself. But if you're going to create value for someone other than yourself, you have to understand how to perceive value, what other people value. So in order to perceive what other people value, you have to know where values come from. Like, where do people get their values? What causes you to value one thing, and you to value something else, and you to value something else, and you to value something else, and me to value yet something else? What causes that? Well, I believe that there are 3 primary, there are more than this, but there are 3 primary places values come from. Number 1, past perceived voids create present pursued values. What does that mean? Things that you feel like were missing in the past are things that you value in the present, so therefore you are pursuing them. Why? Because you didn't have it in the past, but you desired it in the past. So it was lacking, but it was loved. And so now, even though you've never had it, you still desire it. The thing that made me want to be rich more than any other thing was being poor. Right? I'm just keeping it real. I hated being poor. I hated life telling me no, it cost too much every time I desired to do something. So I said, okay, past perceived voids create present pursued values. Another one, present perceived virtues create present perceived values, pursued values. What does that mean? That means things that I perceive as good right now, those are the things that I'll put my effort and energy and time into pursuing. Why? Because present perceived virtues, things that I currently perceive are good, those are the things I value. So if you're talking to me about how to have more of the things that I presently perceive as virtuous or as good, then my answer is going to be an automatic yes. Are y'all tracking? Okay. So number 3, values. So first, values come from past perceived voids, create present pursued values. Present perceived virtues create present pursued values. And then future perceived visions create present pursued values. So if I have a vision for an outcome in the future, and the more clearly I can see that outcome happening for me, the more likely I am to say yes to an offer that tells me that I can have that thing in the future. So if I can learn how to communicate to people in a way that lets them know I can help them fulfill their past perceived voids, their present perceived virtues, and their future perceived visions, they are much more likely to say yes to me and my offer. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So next is, so pillar number one, create a mental wealth inventory. Pillar number two, create a verbal wealth inventory. A verbal wealth inventory. The quality of your life is going to be in direct proportion with the quality of your communication. What does that mean? Well, King Solomon said it like this. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. He said it like this. A man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth. Job said it like this. Thou shalt also declare a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. So our mouths, every word that comes out of our mouths are a seed that we are sowing into the garden of our future. So if I desire to reap a good harvest in the future, because today is yesterday's tomorrow, if I desire to reap a good harvest in the future, then I better be about the business of sowing good seeds with my words today. So, a verbal wealth inventory. You must learn how to convey or communicate the value that you've created clearly. You have to learn how to communicate it clearly. Okay, so I'm going to say something to you. I'm going to quote my daughter first. Here's what she always says. The biggest mistake in communication is thinking that it happened. Wow, what? Okay. Now I'm going to give you an original Myron Golden quote. You didn't say what you thought you said. You said what they thought they heard. Oh, snap. You didn't say what you thought you said. You said what they thought they heard. And so you think you're being clear, and you're actually being cloudy because you haven't practiced your communication. If you think about professionals and amateurs in any arena, it doesn't matter if it's golf or basketball or tennis or brain surgery or chess or sword fighting, it doesn't matter. Martial art, it doesn't matter. You think about any professional, the difference between a professional and an amateur in any arena is professionals spend most of their time preparing and only a small fraction of their time performing. Amateurs spend a large majority of their time performing and a very, very small amount of time preparing. If you will learn to prepare 4 to 10 times as much time, if you'll learn to put 4 to 10 times as much time into preparation as you do to performance, you can move from being an amateur to the arena of being a professional. And guess what happens when you move into the arena of being a professional? You get paid like a professional. But if you're unwilling to prepare your words, like, I'm amazed how most people don't think, they just think they think. And most people who think they're being clear are being as cloudy as a London afternoon. Okay. Or morning, if it's more cloudy in the morning in London. It's been cloudy all day there for me when I was there. Anyway, I'm gonna let somebody else have that. So you have to get clear. And how can I get more? How can I become more clear? Read more, write more. Think like a genius, talk like a third grader. What does that mean? That means have really, really great ideas, but take those really, really great ideas and figure out a way that you could communicate it to a third grader in a way that they would say, oh, I get it. If you can't communicate on a third grade level, communicate on a 5th grade level. If you can't communicate on a 5th grade level, then just go stop working on creating messaging, because you're wasting your breath. One of the reasons you're not clear is because you are attempting to impress people with how smart you are. And I promise you, if they're impressed, they won't be impacted. But if they're impacted, they will be impressed. So instead of attempting to impress people, why don't you just go ahead and impact people with the clarity of your words? Okay. So your wealth will be determined by the level of, you must communicate with the value you've created. You must communicate it clearly, but you must also communicate the value you've created concisely. People have a lot to do. They don't want to sit there and listen to you ramble, and they definitely don't want to sit there and watch you figure out what you're going to say while you're talking to them. If there's something that's painful for me, it's watching you figure it out as you go along while you're attempting to prove to me that you are an expert. Like, just put me out of your misery now, please, right? So you must communicate it clearly. You must communicate it concisely. You have to learn how to get to the point. You spend all of this time making a case. It's interesting. As I'm coaching people, I'll say, okay, when you ask a question, start with my question is, and then ask the question. And they'll say, my question is, well, what had happened was I started a business back in 2017. It wasn't the business I wanted to start, but it was the business I had to start because, and like, time out. That's not a question. Do you understand if you can't even get to the point when you're talking to a coach or an advisor or a spouse or one of your children, if you can't even get to the point, then like, how could you possibly think that you're going to go out and talk to somebody who doesn't know you and communicate a message that is going to be clear? Like, you have to be clear, you have to be concise, get to the point. If you don't know what to say, I was talking to a person who used to be one of my clients and she was an attorney. She said one of the best things that ever happened to me when I was in law school is they made us write out everything. And she said, I learned when I wrote out everything, it helped me become more clear. There's a book that's really, really good at helping people think more clearly. It's called Accidental Genius by Mark Levy. And you can find it in my Amazon storefront, MyronGoldenAMZ.com. But it's called Accidental Genius, and what it does, he teaches this concept called free writing. And he says, just sit down with a pen and a paper and write whatever comes to your mind. Don't think about it, don't edit it, don't fix it, just write. Write. And write for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. He says you will be blown away by how this practice will cause you to become more fluid in your communication and in your thinking. Okay, so you must communicate the value you've created clearly, you must communicate the value you've created concisely, and you must communicate the value you've created compellingly. The value you've created can only be conveyed compellingly if you're talking to them about stuff they care about and showing them that the value you've created is the vehicle or the bridge to get them there. If you talk about what you've created, the value you've created, if you talk about it like it is the destination, like it is the objective, like it is the outcome, what's going to happen is they're going to say something like, let me think about it. Let me talk it over with my wife, my husband, my next door neighbor, who's just as broke as I am, the dog catcher, the milkman, the mailman, or the UPS driver. They're going to come up with some kind of excuse because they don't have enough intestinal fortitude to tell you no, and they believe that if they tell you they've got to think about it, either you won't check back with them, because most people who consider themselves in sales don't check back with them, or when they do check back, they just ignore you, right? So that's their way of telling you no without telling you no, okay? So instead of doing that, sit down and think about them from their perspective. So when you're talking to them, you're only talking to them about stuff they care about instead of talking to them about stuff you want them to care about. See, one of the reasons that I believe that my messaging is so compelling to so many people is because I don't have an objective that I want them focused on. I want them to see that I've obsessed over their objective. And when that's the case, and when people perceive that, then and only then they'll happily be compelled by the value you've created. So, mental wealth inventory. Create a mental wealth inventory. That's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, create a verbal wealth inventory. Pillar number 3, create a tribal wealth community. A tribal wealth community? What does that mean? That means people need people. When God said it's not good for a man to be alone, he was saying that the man needed a wife. But that wasn't all he was saying. He was saying people thrive better among people. Why? Well, if you think about the thing that creates fulfillment, the three things that create fulfillment, which are creation, like I feel more fulfilled if I make something, if I take nothing and make something out of it, or if I take some ingredients and I make a meal, or if I take some lumber and some nails and some drywall and I build something in my house, a closet or a room or an addition or whatever, I always like the sense of, oh, I did that. Or if I sit down and I write a book, the fact that I feel like, oh, I accomplished something, that gives me a level of fulfillment. It doesn't give me complete fulfillment, but at least it gets me on the road. But the second component that creates fulfillment is connection. We need connection with people. Like God created the heavens and the earth, and he created creation, creatures, and creators, but he couldn't relate, like the creatures and the creation couldn't relate to him. So he created creators, or he created man, which is like God, but not God. Why? So that God could have connection with man. But also, it's good for man to have connection with man. So the more people we have in our network, the more fulfilled we're gonna be because we have connection, but the better we can do financially. You will make, like if you have a business, that business will thrive more in a big city than it will thrive in a rural community. Why? Because there's more people. There are more people whose problems you can solve. When you're around more people whose problems you can solve, you can create more wealth. That's what I mean when I say you have to create a tribal wealth community. So you have to build a loosely connected community. This is called your audience. The people who just don't know you, but they know about you. And when you show up, they show up to hear you. They show up to see you, right? It's called your audience. So when you're following these 12 rules for wealth, you've established your mental wealth inventory, you've established your verbal wealth inventory, and now you're creating your tribal wealth community. Okay, the first level of that community is your audience. How many people are paying attention to you? Because I got news for you. If you don't get them to pay attention to you, they're not going to pay you. If they don't pay you with their attention, they're not eventually going to pay you with their assets. But if you will figure out a way to get people to pay attention to you, it won't be long before a percentage of them will pay you. Okay, so as we're thinking about the 12 rules for wealth, how big is your audience? People say, well, I've got 300 followers on Instagram, and I've got 400 subscribers on YouTube. That's great for a start, but don't let it stay there. And one of the reasons, this is so interesting, one of the reasons that we don't build a tribal wealth community that's loosely connected to us, that's called an audience, is because we've been programmed not to like the sound of our own voice. So we spend our life hiding our voice, hiding our value, and not communicating to the world that we can help them. But the reality is, if you couldn't help people in the world, you wouldn't be here. You'd already be gone. So we were created for creation. We feel fulfilled when we're creating. We also feel fulfilled when we're connected, but we also feel fulfilled when we're contributing. And so that's another reason why it's good to be around people, because when you're around people, there are more people to create. There are more people to create solutions for. So there's more opportunities for you to get paid. There are more people for you to be connected to. And this person's going to know that person. This person's going to have this idea, and all of these things are going to bounce off of each other. So now you've got this community of people that you're vibing with, and then lastly, you have people that you can contribute to. And hopefully, all of us, have somebody in our lives that we contribute to consistently that have absolutely nothing to offer us in return, because that's the level of contribution that really amplifies fulfillment. So if we have all three of those, we're in great shape. But guess what we need for all three of those? We need people. We need a tribal wealth community. And it starts with our loosely connected community, and that community is called our audience. How big is your audience? I have a community of high-level entrepreneurs who are in a coaching program that I have that's $55,000 a year. And one of the things that I perpetually warn them about, and it's hard for them to believe it, especially when they're young. Young people have a tendency to believe that things are going to be the way they've been because they've not been here that long. And that's not a bad thing. So like everything great feels greater to a young person. And everything painful feels worse to a young person. Why? Because if you think about it, if you're 20 years old, right, and you've been struggling for 10 years, you've been struggling for half your life, right? So it seems like forever. But if you're 60 and you've been struggling for 10 years, well, it ain't that deep. I mean, right? Oh yeah, I've been here before. I'll be here again, right? Right? I've been here before. It's not going to last that long, right? So you've just lived long enough to know that life happens in cycles. If things are going great when you're 20, you think they're going great because you're great. Can I get a witness? And you're like, man, I'm having all that. Like, I see all these young people making millions of dollars, and God bless them. Congratulations. Go kids, go. But they think they're successful because of them. And the reality is, Oftentimes they're successful because they were in the right place at the right time with the right opportunity, and they took some action. And the action they took was not even really all that great. It was just enough to get them to a place where they thought, I have arrived. I've got news for you, regardless of age. There is no arrive. There's only the journey. The journey is the destination. Okay, so you need a loosely connected community, your audience. And then you build a more closely connected community. That's your clients. Those are the people who actually pay you with their assets. Your audience pays you with their attention. Your clients pay you with their assets. They actually pay you money because the thing that you have for them is valuable. Okay. And then you build a co-working connected community. This is your team. These are the people who help you do the things you do so that you don't have to do everything by yourself. Because if you are the chief cook and bottle washer, you are also the chief cook and bottleneck. Oh, snap. And so some of us can't get out of our own way. And the reason we resist hiring people is probably for the same reason I resisted hiring people for a long time, because I was scared. Yeah, you say, Myron, what do you mean you were scared? I'm like, well, I mean, our business only makes so much money, and like, I gotta pay him if I'm gonna hire him. If I hire him and I gotta pay him, what if we don't make enough money to pay him? And then I told this person they're gonna be able to pay their bills, and now I can't pay them, they can't pay their bills, and now I'm responsible for them living in the dark. Now, maybe those weren't your thoughts, but they were definitely mine. And I remember, like it was yesterday, I was playing golf with David Mitchell, great friend of mine, and he had a really successful business. His business was like crushing it, like way more than mine. I was like, David, how many employees do you have? He said, I don't know. He's really relaxed. I don't know, probably 60 or 70. I said, doesn't that make you nervous? He got even more relaxed. I'm like, what's this brother? And he said, nah. His wife's name is Charlotte. He said, nah, Charlotte and I have been praying for years that the Lord would give us a business so we could hire good Christian people so they could feed their babies. I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, what? Like, who thinks like that? Right? And I was like, okay, so clearly there's something I haven't learned yet, right? And David was so consumed with creating opportunities for other people that he was like, nah, having 60 or 70 people on my payroll doesn't make me nervous. Okay, that's another level. Well, let me help you with that. As you're building your team, my recommendation would be to hire one person at a time, hire them part-time, and hire them to do the thing you hate the most and that you're terrible at. And find somebody who's good at what you're terrible at and who loves to do what you hate to do. Now, this was so hard for me to believe because I would feel bad for giving people work to do. I kind of still do sometimes, to be honest with you. Okay, I'm an old softie, more old than softie, so don't get it twisted. Okay, so I would feel bad for asking people to do stuff that I'm paying them for. And because I'm like, I would hate to do this. But they love it. I'm like, but I'm thinking to myself, how could you love this? Like, how could you love a spreadsheet? Like when somebody, hey, just create a spreadsheet, send me a spreadsheet. Like the thought of creating a spreadsheet, the thought of creating a PowerPoint, like it almost gives me shingles. It's just like, ugh. It feels, ugh. It's so terrible. Like, but it's not. Some people love that stuff. And so, you have to build a team. So hey, for some of you, you know who it is? You need to hire a housekeeper 1 day a week. Come in and clean your house. It'll free up so much mental bandwidth. And then when they do a good job and you start making more money, because if anybody frees up mental bandwidth for you, it will make you more money because you will have the ability to think so you can grow rich. So hire a housekeeper, hire a cook, hire somebody to cut the grass, hire somebody to clean the pool. Whatever the thing is that you hate to do, that you have to do. Like, I'm good at working on cars, but I don't do it. In fact, I don't have a toolbox because I might be tempted to work on something. Say, Myron, why don't you got a yard, bro. Why don't you have a lawnmower? I might be tempted to cut my grass. I ain't trying to be, sometimes the best way to not yield to temptation, don't put yourself in a place where temptation can happen. Can you imagine me 96 degrees? I'm out there sitting on a lawnmower riding around in circles? Baby. Okay, sorry. No, right? Hire somebody who frees up bandwidth for you. For some of you, that's going to be like somebody who's going to do fulfillment when you sell stuff. For some of you, it's going to be somebody who's going to shoot and edit videos. I don't know what it's going to be, but stop thinking that you're going to make more money by doing everything yourself and keeping the money to yourself. Take some of that money and pay somebody to do some of the stuff you hate to do and you're not good at. I promise you, it'll change your life like very few other things will. Okay, so so pillar number 1 in 12 Rules for Wealth, create a mental wealth inventory. Pillar number 2, create a verbal wealth inventory. Pillar number 3, create a tribal wealth community. Pillar number 4, create a practical wealth activity. And there are 3 different arenas in which we must create a practical wealth activity. Number 1, we have to create a practical wealth activity in the arena of business. Now, the reality is, if you do the second one, you don't have to do the first one. But if you do the first one and you do the second one, you can do it all way faster. So the first principle is, the first practical wealth activity is, you have to start and build a business. Now, you can create wealth as an employee without having a business. It just takes longer, and it requires a level of discipline that many people don't have. Okay? Like, I really literally believe with every fiber in my being, if I had a job making hamburgers at McDonald's, I could become a millionaire. It would take longer, but I could become a millionaire. Because the level of wealth that you create is not predominantly determined by how much money you make. It's not. I'll get to that when I get to principle number 2. But principle number 1 is you must have good business practices. You got to start a business. Good business practices. What are good business practices? Obsessing over other people's problems. What are good business practices? Obsessing over your messaging so that when you talk to people about the solution you've created, they say, "Can I pay you now?" Right? Not, "Oh, I think I might be interested in that." You know what that means? Nothing. I might be interested in that means, here's what it means. I'm not buying this from you, but I don't have enough intestinal fortitude to tell you no. That's what I might be interested in that means. But when I create messaging, my messaging is not designed to create a response that says, I might be interested in that. My messaging is designed for people to say, "Can I pay you for it right now?" Yes, you can. Okay. So you must have good business practices. You must have good money management practices. By the way, if you want to find out about where to get good business practices, you can read this book. It's called B.O.S.S Moves. B.O.S S Moves is an acronym. B.O.S S is an acronym. It stands for Business Optimization Success Secrets. This is my this is my business brain in a book. Okay, B.O.S S Moves. Okay, so if you will practice these principles, you can create wealth. And that's not me trying to sell books. You can only get that book on bossmovesbook.com. Or you can attend the Make More Offers Challenge. You see behind me it says Make More Offers Challenge. If you attend the Make More Offers Challenge, I spend 5 days teaching you how to have good business practices. Lead generation practices on day 1, core product offers on day 2, premium value offers on day 3, continuity offers on day 4, and then putting it all together on day 5. That's what I show you in the Make More Offers Challenge. So if you go to makemoreofferschallenge.com, you can sign up and learn how to create some of these great business practices. Okay, and some people who are watching this right now are thinking, "Oh, he's just trying to sell books in the challenge." Okay, then don't buy the book and don't buy the challenge. There's no compulsion in anything I'm saying. I'm just making you aware. And when it comes to a good business practice, one of the practices I have, if you buy the VIP experience of the Make More Offers Challenge, which is $297, I give a 10 times better than money back guarantee, which means I guarantee you that if you don't believe it was worth 10 times what you paid for it, on Friday, I'm going to remind you to get a refund before the challenge is over. What? Yes. Why? Because it's a good business practice to not take people's money unless they feel like they've gotten more value than the money they paid. Okay, you're tracking. So, principle number 1, under create a practical wealth activity, you must have good business practices. Number 2, you must have good money management practices. This is how you create wealth if you have a job and you don't have any desire whatsoever to start a business. All you have to do is manage your money better. And in this book, From the Trash Man to the Cash Man, How Anyone Can Get Rich Starting From Anywhere, one of the chapters is on the money management principle of millionaires. I can if my can say I can. And if I worked at McDonald's or Taco Bell, or if I worked at some place where they don't pay you that much money, I could become a millionaire by practicing the money management principle of millionaires in this book. And it's called I Can If My Can Say I Can. And so get better at managing your money so the outgo doesn't exceed the income, so the upkeep does not become the downfall. And if you will do that, even if you don't make that much money, you can become a millionaire, and probably inside 20 years, like without even having a business, right? And 20 years is going to go by anyway, so you might as well. But can you imagine what would happen if you have good business practices and good money management practices, right? Most people just have terrible money management practices, like just terrible. You're like, they spend way more than they make, and they've got two problems with that. One, they don't make enough. Two, they spend way too much. But all of us could live off of way less than we live off of now. We're just unwilling to do it. Like I remember I used to live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I remember when this restaurant opened. It was a little restaurant, Uptown Plaza, called the Great Wall. Rob, do you remember when the Great Wall opened? And there were like 15 people, 15 Chinese people. They didn't live that far from the restaurant. They all lived in the same house, multiple families. They all lived in the same house. They started that restaurant, and then they built it up, and then they went and opened up another one. And then another family member would move out, and they'd go get another house and from the money they made, and then they'd help that person get started. And then they'd do it again, they'd help that person get started. One of the reasons we have such a hard time creating wealth is because we've got so much pride. We have so much Frank Sinatra, I did it my way mentality inside of us that we don't realize the reason that God put people in families and in communities is because he put us here by ourselves, but he did not put us here for ourselves. And so we could figure out a way to spend less money. One of my team members just told me the other day, they're going to be moving in with a family member. They're going to be partnering, splitting the rents. That's such a brilliant idea. It's such a great idea. Why? Because then you can spend less money and you can do more with the money that you're making to turn that into more wealth. So you must have, number one, good business practices. Number two, you must have good money management practices. And number three, you must have good investment practices. So I'm going to share with you something I wish someone would have shared with me when I was much younger than I am right now. And that is two of the best places to invest money, in my opinion. I'm 63, I don't know everything, but I've learned a thing or two about a thing or two. The two best places to invest money, number one, some kind of permanent life insurance, index universal life, whole life insurance, something where the life insurance also has a savings component with it. I know, buy term and invest the difference. I get it. A lot of people would disagree with me on this. I know. I used to preach and teach buy term and invest the difference, but I noticed what would happen in reality. That's a great philosophy, but in reality, most people who bought the term insurance did not invest the difference. So when it came time for, as they got older and less likely to be insurable, and if they let their insurance lapse, it became harder and harder and harder for them to get more insurance, and they still didn't have any cash. So if you buy the whole life insurance, it doesn't build wealth rapidly, but it builds transferable, non-taxable wealth. And number two, another great place to invest money is in real estate. Every single solitary person listening to my voice right now, hear me when I tell you, invest in some real estate that you do not live in. Or if you do live in it, invest in a multifamily where you rent out, I don't care if it's a duplex, a fourplex, an eightplex, where you rent out some of the units, and then you have the tenants paying off your mortgage. If you can figure out how to like build your credit up to the place where you can invest in a fourplex, and you can rent out 3 of those, you can live in one of the 4 units for free, and have other people pay off the debt, and then you get the appreciation, the value of the property goes up, your wealth goes up, and you get the depreciation, you get to write off the first 27 and a half years of expenses on your taxes, and you get to do that in the first year. What? So when you think about these 4 pillars, by the way, this is me wrapping it up in a pretty little bow. When you think about the 4 pillars of the 12 rules for wealth, when you think about having a mental wealth inventory, when you think about having a verbal wealth inventory, when you think about having the verbal wealth inventory, when you think about having the tribal wealth community, and you think about having the practical wealth activity, when you put all of that stuff together, it lines up perfectly with the 4 levels of value. The mental wealth inventory is the imagination level. The verbal wealth inventory is on the communication level. The tribal wealth community is on the unification level, and the practical wealth activity is on the implementation level. And guess what? You have to have all 4. So when you combine that together, then congratulations. you've stepped into the arena of wealth. And now it's time for you to get playing. Start playing in the arena of wealth instead of playing in the arena of lack. Congratulations again for being in the right place at the right time. I hope this video helps you take your life and your lifestyle to the next level. Stay blessed by the best, and we'll see you